I wanted to not go too different. I wanted to spend a lot of time on Quran because what I've realized, I think sometimes just by spending some time reciting the Quran and having that little practice here, I think is quite beneficial. So I really wanted to do a bit more time on that. Maybe from just 6:30, maybe even before that. Actually committing to the bit that we're going to read from the Quran. I really wanted to spend time on that. But before that, basically, we were focusing on taqwa as an awareness of Allah, and then we applied it to two key areas. One was of our consumption, one was the food that we take in, and the other thing was the news and the information that we take in, and realizing that it's our job to be quite careful about how we actually handle the information that comes in, and how we actually deal with the food that we eat as well. And the other thing was obviously, which is always on our consumption list, is even just the breathing. So I think yesterday we went more deep into the way that we breathe than we've really been before, especially at least in Ramadan, I think. So again, that just brings attention to how we kind of draw in our breath and how we kind of communicate with our body based on where our breath is. Does everyone remember that yesterday? So I gave like 2 or 3 techniques for breathing yesterday. Does anyone remember them? The different methods? Because I think if you guys can mention them, then yeah, I like to give that a name. That's called box breathing, which is really very, very powerful, I think. That was one of the simpler ways. And all of these techniques, like these, you're probably not going to find them in the Quran or the Sunnah, if I'm honest. But like I said, some of these solutions which we're working on, like for example, one of the problems we have nowadays is kind of, especially with the younger generation, with the millennials, is the issue of a smartphone. And even like we mentioned yesterday, the issue of Google to some extent, like having all the information in the world available at our fingertips. So that causes this thing called information overload. Now we probably heard of this, but how much have we actually thought about what that does to our concentration, to our focus, and how much we can actually bring our attention to where we actually need to where we actually need to be. And that's why breathing is actually kind of rather than, it's not really the point of the exercise. It's not. I mean, obviously the reason that we do it is to kind of prep ourselves for being able to focus on the Quran, for example, yesterday. Assalamu alaikum, Yusuf, man. Are you okay, Yusuf? Which Yusuf is this, man? I really do have curiosity about the people that are here, man. I do like to know who's here. I know, man. Yusuf, my name's Habib. He's asking who I am. So the respected Sheikh. My name's Habib Ahmed, man. I want to know who you are. Everyone knows who I am, man. I'm boring. You're the exciting person. You're the first time we've got Yusuf in our chat. But anyway, Yusuf, man, do I know you? I've got a feeling I do, man. I always know people that end up in this conversation. But that's what's really, really important anyway, man. Just getting that, because that overcomes the information overload which we have. Because I guess what information overload causes is this like really constant flow of thoughts in our mind. And I don't think the Sahaba, radiallahu anhu, like I don't think even when I was in school I had this problem. Because nobody had an iPhone. I think I was in year 9, I think, when the iPhone 3 actually came out. When smartphones became relatively affordable, but like the average person kind of had it. Adults had them anyway. And by the time I was in year 11, that's when, year 10, when I was doing GCSEs, that's when kids had smartphones. And I think we sometimes underestimate the effect that has on our society, and how that changes the way that we that we actually behave in society, because then now we have this constant barrage of information. The act of waiting actually becomes very different to what waiting was like before. Like people before, like the idea of waiting for some information, or kind of taking your time to do something and setting time to do something, it was the normal way to do something. But after this era, kind of everything kind of became a rush, and very often stuff became blurred into one another. So that's why it's very, very important. I think this breathing exercise, what it does is it gives a bit of notice to this blurriness which sometimes happens, and this kind of fuzziness which sometimes happens around our thoughts and our minds. Does that make sense to everyone? So it's kind of a prep for what's to come, for how we're going to be able to concentrate on the Quran and actually focus on what we're going to do. But anyway, man, and this is really important, because when, like, for example, even the idea of praying salah, the whole process of just simply stopping and praying salah it's a reset for our taqwa. Yeah, this is quite a simple concept to understand. So taqwa, we all know what taqwa is. What's taqwa? It's the awareness that we have of Allah, isn't it? Yeah, that's our taqwa. Now, I believe that this awareness, it kind of depletes over time. Yeah, I think everyone has probably noticed this, that when I asked you on that first day, how's your taqwa, and kind of look at it on the speedometer or something, some of you would have been like, well, it's up, sometimes it's at this level, sometimes it's at this level. I remember somebody actually replied by saying, well, I don't know, it's always going up and down, which is very, very true, actually. And I wanted to just deepen that a little bit today, because our taqwa will always be going up and down. In fact, it will be at a stage and then it will deplete, and then sometimes we can have things which will reset it. Does that make sense? So now, one of the things which resets it is the most powerful spiritual activation which we have, which is praying salah. Yeah. So 5 times a day we get this chance to reset our taqwa. So now, if let's say you've prayed, you've woken up in the morning, I think going to sleep is probably one of the biggest resets. So when you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning, you have that awareness of yourself, and you're able to actually do what you want to and do what you know you need to do. Then you pray Fajr Salah, hopefully. If you're waking up at the wrong time, you might be reading Dhuhr or something. But hopefully you're praying Fajr in the morning, or if it's Ramadan, you might be going to sleep again and then praying Dhuhr. But these things, they kind of bring this awareness to our taqwa. Does that make sense? And to some extent it resets it, and you could say it recharges it. Yeah, so all of these things that recharge. Even doing a breathing exercise, it recharges our taqwa, because we're back in touch with Allah. So the thing which actually gets us in touch with Allah are these spiritual activities. Yeah. So now, if those are the things which are going to get in touch with Allah, if we do them without actually slowing down, without actually giving them their attention, without actually appreciating their value, then it's so easy, and I've seen this, quite often. It's very easy to just miss the whole point. Does that make sense? So then we'll come, for example, and we'll jump up, and it will be Zuhr time. So we'll come and be like, Allah Akbar, and we're just having this like race going through our head. And then we go down into ruku, and then all of this is just becoming a big race. So this realization that these spiritual activities are actually what get us back in touch with Allah, which essentially is what solidifies our belief. Yeah. So if you're looking at the slide, this is quite an important thing which we covered, and I know we're going through this is day 7, what we've done on day 7, so just over a week ago. But the importance of understanding the direct correlation between the spiritual activity, what that does for your connection to Allah, and how the actual awareness you have of Allah, the connection that you have with Allah, that's what actually decides your beliefs. Does that make sense? The reason I'm saying this is because very often, especially those of you that were born Muslims, you might think that you learnt your beliefs from going to the madrasa, and then the teacher says there is one Allah, for example, or Allah created you, or Allah cares about you, or Allah loves you, or Allah, will put you in paradise if you do this. And although I can tell you that as information, or maybe your teacher can tell you that as information, what it is, it's not a piece of information which is just meant to go into your logical mind. Everyone getting this? He's gone too deep. Have some of you fallen asleep? Is everyone awake here? This is good, man, good. Alhamdulillah, man. We've done this a lot of times here, but I speak to people and they still don't get this. So I thought I want to go through this a little bit more, especially with this dua thing, man. Because dua is, anyway, we'll come to dua in a minute. But I forgot what I was saying, man. I shouldn't ask you whether you're listening or not. You should keep doing thumbs up and saying stuff, man. MashaAllah. But that's why this is so important. So now, if I want to summarize this, because I want you guys to be able to summarize this as well. Does that make sense? I don't want me to be able to tell you and then you go off and say, oh, Habib said something which is new and different, but I can't actually explain it to you. So it should be, this is not a particularly complex thing, but if you haven't thought about it, you might struggle to put it into words. Yeah, so now I'm going to put it into words, but I want you to listen so that after this lesson is finished, you can also put it into words and explain it to your wife or your husband or your kids. And when you teach Islam to any of the friends or whatever, you can say that we pray and we have all these beliefs, but the whole point of everything is to solidify our belief in Allah. And when we solidify that belief, that is what will actually enhance the things which we're chasing. For example, in Ramadan, we're going after Taqwa. Yeah, so the point of that siyam, of the exercise of not putting food in your mouth, is so that you have this heightened awareness of Allah. The point of praying is very similar. So the point of taking that time out, taking out those 5-10 minutes, stopping everything, raising your hands like this, then reciting parts of the Quran, bowing before Allah, going into prostration before Allah. Like all of these random things that we do, they're not random, obviously. They're very, very beautifully structured, in fact. But the reason behind them is so that by the time when we keep doing these and we do them consistently, then this thing which we know is true now becomes part of a belief system. And when it becomes part of that belief system, then what happens? G people. Okay, so what happens? Good. Okay, good. So I want you just to remember another thing which I've probably said every single day as well, which is that we have two aspects of taqwa. You should all know this by now. G people, two aspects of taqwa. Come on, people. Good. Yes, very good. So those are the two things of taqwa in it. One is, Yusuf, you have to tell me who you are, man. This guy. Gosh, man. So why didn't we help from the beginning, man? Yusuf. Anyway, man. Staying anonymous. Does anyone know who he is? And let me just say salam. Salman, assalamu alaikum. Wissam, assalamu alaikum. Shahzad, say assalamu. My brother's here. Assalamu alaikum. Madhu's here. I don't know why he's coming. Sister Inaya is here as well. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Nadim's already said salam as well. Nice to have you all, man. Anyway. So two aspects of taqwa. One is your awareness. One is mindset. And one is more like your actual control. Yeah, these are two separate things. But they both fluctuate. So what happens when you, for example, do this siyam and you don't put things in your mouth? One is that your awareness of Allah goes up. And then the other thing is that you're actually able to control what happens around you, what happens in your daily life. And that's what's really important, because now they come together. So once you have a heightened awareness of Allah, automatically what will happen is now you're much more likely to be able to actually have discipline in your life. Now you can control yourself. Now when it's time to do something which is hard or something which you're not habituated, and just essentially when we try and make ourselves a bit better, we're usually aiming to build in a habit. Yeah. And I know, especially people that are born Muslims, they often don't actually understand this concept of when you're trying to improve yourself, you're looking to increase a good habit. Yeah. The problem with sometimes in our culture, especially, is we kind of think that when you're a Muslim, like you're perfect, like everything you do is, mashallah, like so good. But obviously that's not true. You are who you are, and you do whatever you do, and in order to become better, we're looking to try and bring some habits into our lives. We're trying to change a couple of things, and what that means is, as human beings, we are creatures of habit. Everything we do is based on our habits. Yeah. So as soon as we decide that I've got a habit of, what's a bad habit, man? Someone give me an example. You can give me an example from your own life if you want. Any kind of sorry? Smoking, sleeping too much. I prefer sleeping too much, if I'm honest. Anyone else? Um, Eating too much, mashallah. We were on the last couple of days. Gee. Anyone else? Smoking. I think smoking is probably the easiest one. Um, that's a bit too deep. Salman, you're going too deep for everyone, man. No, that's a really good. That's a really good answer, if I'm honest. But also, like, it's very deep. So what Salman said is thinking that you know, which I think is a habit which everyone has. And we struggle with that a lot because it becomes a big obstacle, doesn't it? If you think you know something, so then somebody comes along and says, well, perhaps you should read this book, perhaps you should learn this, perhaps you should practice reading Surah Fatiha, perhaps you should learn how to recite the Quran, perhaps you should do something else, and you're like, oh, do you know everything? And one of the effects of thinking that you know everything is obviously that you become busy. And this is what you notice, that people who always say that they're busy, I don't like having anything against them because you probably will know people that are like this. But they tend to have a habit of thinking that they know everything. So if you say, okay, you should do this, and they're like, no, I'm too busy. It's a very automatic defense system. Like it actually stops you from making these changes. And coming back to the point we're actually making here, which is about the habit that we have to change. Yeah. So now these are big obstacles which Salman has mentioned. But Wissam's example of smoking is actually a nice simple one. So somebody's smoking. Yeah, so this is the habit which somebody has. Now, there's two ways of going about this. The thing is that you'll have some people who will say that you should just stop straight away. Yeah? So straight away you should, like cold turkey I think it's called. That straight away, if you're smoking 20 a day today, then tomorrow you should smoke 0. Which I don't know, that's one way. But if you actually look at how the NHS, the National Health Service, deal with it, very often there'll be a plan in place. So if you're smoking 20 today, then tomorrow you'll try and instead of having 20, how many will you have? 19, innit? You'll try and go down to 19. And then obviously by Sunday you maybe try and go to 18, or maybe you'll like slow it down even more. Maybe you spend a whole week like cutting down by 1. And then cutting down by 2. I'm not really sure. I've never smoked 20 a day, to be honest. So I'm not really sure what it feels like. But I'm not really sure how quickly it's safe to. For those of you that need advice on smoking, you should consult the NHS. But the problem is, again, we have to realize that it's a change of a habit. If your habit's 20 a day, then making a habit of 19 a day is actually an improvement for you. Yeah, then making a habit of 18 is an improvement. Then when you come down to 10 a day, you're improving. Then you're 5 a day, and then you cutting this habit out of your life. You're changing that habit. Yeah, but this is where the pain comes in. Yeah, this is where you're going to need a lot of taqwa. Most people that smoke 20 a day, and you say to them, why don't you start smoking? They're like, I don't need to, or this is something I can stop whenever I want to anyway. Whereas in reality, when somebody has that awareness of Allah, first thing, mindset. You have a mindset that, I am in touch with Allah, I'm connected to Allah. And then there's the realization that mindset makes you have, which is that there's an action which needs to change, there's a habit which needs to be developed. And that's where taqwa actually comes into play. Now, what I mean by taqwa can run out, or taqwa can go up and down, is that when you wake up in the morning, you might have more. When you pray salah and you've just finished, you might have more. If you just spend 10 days in seclusion in the masjid, in i'tikaf, you'll have a much higher level of taqwa. It'll be much easier for you to make these big changes, big, bold decisions. But very often, what we actually have to do is make these small habit changes, so that they actually become things which we do naturally as habit. Does that make sense? So that's the aim that we're trying to do. Now, the reason this is really important is because the step after this, the step after identifying where you are and where you want to go, is to do what? Is to identify an action point. Does that make sense? And this is really one of the things which I thought was really, really important actually, is that when we're making dua, sometimes we're a bit distant from the dua. We're not actually, like, people make dua, for like something very abstract. Has anyone tried the dua course, by the way, from the guys that are here? I don't think anyone has. I need to do it myself, if I'm honest. It's a pretty good course. I'm thinking to start it. Do any of you want to start it with me? Anyway. But yeah, so that dua course is very useful. So what happens there is I divide dua. Who's that? Oh, Hamdan. Okay, inshallah. It's 10 minutes a day. And I think there's quite a bit of writing you have to do. So I think because obviously we all have, there's two types of du'as we generally have, yeah? One is, I think we can understand best, is probably on the 27th night of Ramadan, when it's like we're feeling really close to Allah, and we pray Tarawih, and then we pray Tahajjud as well, and then we raise our hands and we ask Allah to solve all of our problems. Yeah, so that's one type of dua. When you speak to Allah and you ask Him to kind of change something about which is going on, or give you something which you don't have. Yeah, that's one type of dua. Then there's another type of dua, which is like the dua we make before we start eating, or the dua we make in Ramadan before we break the fast, or before we even the simplest of things, like even before you enter the toilet, there's a dua to recite there. Does that make sense? So there's two types of du'as which are generally there. So what the dua course does is it takes both of these types and it makes them more tangible. So now the reason we've ended up here now at dua is because if you look at any of the things you guys mentioned, someone mentioned smoking, someone mentioned lying, someone mentioned any habit which needs to change, which you want to change, any of these habits, they're going to require what? They're going to require some action. Yeah. So now we all, for example, let's take the dua which Dr. Ramadhan said, which is like probably one of the duas which we might do maybe when we're actually holding our hands before Allah. Like رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Something like that, where we ask Allah just for goodness. We ask Allah for ease. We ask Allah to make our life better. We ask Allah to give us Jannah. We ask Allah to make us stop doing sins. Yeah, we ask Allah for all these great things. Now we ask Allah for the identity shift. Yeah, and as we covered, the identity shift is what we're looking for. I want to be a person who doesn't do sins. So we ask Allah, make me somebody who doesn't do sins. So immediately we become that person. Yeah, does that make sense to everyone? But we also know, based on what we've just gone through now, yeah, is that just like you have identity shift, you also have a process and an outcome for a dua. Yeah. So we're not just wanting to become sinless, we also want to go through the process of becoming sinless. And before that, we need to identify that becoming sinless is the outcome. For example, if sinless is one of the things you're making dua for. If you're making dua for goodness, then you need to be somebody who is actively seeking to have good things inside your life. So you have an action point for what kind of good things do you bring into your life, if you're asking for hasana. And what kind of outcome does that actually mean? So now, instead of just being generic and saying, I want to be this kind of person, we've actually made a plan on how we're going to get there. Does this make sense to everyone? A lot of you are writing in the comments. G people, does this make sense, what I've just said there? Yes? Gee, is everyone else following that? Because this is an important point. Okay, good man. Good. MashaAllah, Murad's made it as well. So then, now, because what that does is now it gives you the action point which you need. Which is before we were saying, okay, I want to stop smoking, I want to stop lying, I want to stop doing this. And now the action point is, I want to be able to smoke less than 20 cigarettes a day if somebody's on 20. Yeah, if somebody's lying, they say, I want to be able to not lie when I felt like lying at least once every day. These become slightly more direct action points. What was the other evil habits which we're giving up, man? Gee, I've forgotten all of the... Sleeping too much. Yeah, sleeping too much. Now again, this is much easier. Yeah. So sleeping too much is obviously it's a really, it's not a very sensible thing to do, because it makes you more sleepy. And so now when we try and deal with this problem, again, it's going to have to start from somewhere. So number one, you're going to have to identify how many hours am I planning to sleep per 24 hours of my life. Yeah. How many of those 24, how many per 24 hours, how many hours do I want to be sleeping? And if you identify that's going to be 8, that's going to be 9. If it's Ramadan, maybe you're allowed 10 if you're very, very tired. But generally you're probably looking at 8. If you're sensible, maybe 7 or 6 or something like that. And then you fix that. That this is how many hours I want to sleep every day. And then once we've identified that, then we're going to look at some kind of process. So the process is going to involve identifying when are you actually going to jump into bed and close your eyes. Well, this is, believe it or not, this is part of the process of sleeping. So if you haven't identified when you're going to do this really important action, so in order for you to fall asleep, you have to do this action of like getting dressed for bed, lying down and closing your eyes. I know this might be news for some of you, but this is actually a really important part of falling asleep. And at this point, before we start making dua for Allah to make us people who sleep like the amount of hours we're meant to, we also have to be aware of what the plan is for that to happen. So this is really, really important, because if you want to make some kind of change, if we want to become better, we want to become people who don't do sins, we want to become people who are close to Allah, we want to become people of taqwa, people of goodness, whatever we want to become. We want to have all these massive identity shifts, and we're asking Allah to change all these things. But we don't even have a single action which we're actually aware of, which we're taking to get us there. Like we haven't identified a bedtime or a waking up time, or what kind of food we're going to eat, or how much we're going to pray, or how we're going to improve our prayer, or what we're going to do for our focus. Like if you can't focus and follow your breath for 2 or 3 breaths. So if when we say Allahu Akbar in prayer, our focus goes before we've even finished Surah Fatiha, then these are like really obvious, basic, simple action points which we can start focusing on. Does that make sense to everyone? And I know this is revision for some of you, but I think that was really, really important, man, because this is one of the things which sometimes actually confuses a lot of Muslims, this whole dua thing. But anyway, man. Gee, I'm going to read through the chat, see what you guys are saying. What's everyone saying? Yusuf, man, are you going to stay anonymous? For Brother Yusuf and Anonymous. Oh, the dua course. Yeah, so there's some courses on YouTube, basically, which are good. So I'm planning to start the dua course. I've been meaning to do this a lot for a long time. It's only 5 days, so we can finish it by day 20. So by the time the last 10 nights starts, hopefully, what the dua course does is basically, you know what we just did in today's lesson, which is realize that we have this belief system which we need to sort out. The way that we believe in Allah needs to be sorted out. And once we identify that, then we realize one of the most powerful ways to do that is actually to sort out our dua and get Allah to help us in sorting out the problems that we have in our life. And one of the reasons sometimes our du'as are ineffective is because there's no action behind any of them. So we're just asking for the identity shift rather than doing any action to help the identity shift happen. So what we then do is, based on where we are today, we figure out a bit more tangibly where is it that we want to be. So if we take Wissam's example of somebody who's smoking 20 a day, maybe they say that in 20 weeks I want to be smoking 0 a day. That means that tomorrow I'm going to be smoking. It's Ramadan, so people probably aren't doing that. But this is just a basic example. This is not the way that is. So we can take this for any example, for anything that we want to change. if you want to concentrate in your prayer from beginning all the way till the end, then you're going to have to be able to sit down in one place and be able to actually recite Surah Fatiha from beginning to end without thinking about something else, without getting distracted. You should actually be able to maintain that focus on the word of Allah. And believe it or not, that takes lots and lots of practice and lots of action. That's one famous example. Another thing, you might want to be able to make dua so your du'as actually get accepted. So that would require some kind of an investment. And the biggest investment is thinking about your life a little bit. Like, what do I actually want to even achieve? What is it that I want Allah to help me with? And for some of you, and I've noticed with a lot of the people I work with, there's a lot of unconscious energy here, man. I'm not sure whether you guys can notice that. But when I ask you, what is it that you want Allah to actually help you with? Most people don't have any idea. And then they're like, oh, I'm making dua for this X, Y, and Z. Well, you need to be aware of what are you actually trying to achieve? And if there's not an action, then there's usually that distance. And because we don't know, like Salman said, as soon as we don't know something, the unconscious energy comes up. This is a very clever trick of shaitan, to the extent that I think our minds are wired like this sometimes. When we don't know, we go unconscious and run away from it. As opposed to saying, okay, I don't know what I want to actually ask Allah to help me with. So let me just take like a couple of days. Let me do a 5-day course and figure it out. But that's something which I think is very, very important sometimes, man. Just taking that time to actually serious. Because then now, because we believe as Muslims that when we make dua, Allah accepts our duas. So we're not like on our own in the world. Isn't it, people? So we have the honor of co-creating the future with Allah, and that's a massive thing for us to have that opportunity. So now we're going to ask Allah to help us create our reality, to create our future. So that this action requires this thinking. So now I know we've spoken about this for a bit, but genuinely, man, this idea of, because I think this is sometimes like let me slow down a bit, man. But even if we're trying to teach our kids how to make dua, if you don't actually know how to make dua yourself, you're not going to be able to teach it. And that's what I think is sometimes, which very often causes the problems. And another thing is actually that in the default mode of the society at the moment is to ask disempowering questions, like we done yesterday. When we turn the TV on, what's on the news? See, who wants to answer that question? What does the news tell us? It tells us what's going wrong, isn't it? The things we love to hear about are what's going wrong. The news tells us what's going wrong. And then we actually get into the habit of asking this question of what is going wrong, what's bad, what's wrong with me, why is Allah not helping me, why is my life so bad, and we ask all of these kind of questions. So this is why it's important for our dua to be more effective, that we go from this state of asking that, why is my dua not getting accepted, to trying to figure out how it is that my dua is actually going to get accepted. So there's some questions on the board, which are good. So for those of you that are struggling, inshallah, I would recommend doing the dua course. I made that dua course a long time ago, actually. It might be a bit thing, but I think one of the most beautiful things about the dua course, which is on YouTube, is that it'll take the duas which you have for like going to the toilet and eating, and then the duas which you make at the beginning of the day after praying and all of that, and it will and when you start merging them, you realize that the things you always make in dua for, like, oh Allah, make me pious or whatever, that actually merges with the dua which you make before you eat food, if that makes any sense. But that's now obviously you'll understand this if you do the course. So that's why I definitely recommend that. So I'm planning, inshallah, to start that myself. It's hard though, man. I have to find 10 minutes. I don't know where I'm going to get 10 minutes from. But I'm going to try and start that, inshallah. And that will, inshallah, if I'm doing that, then if any of you guys want to join me, then hopefully from tomorrow until the 20th of Ramadan, hopefully we'll have a bit of a deepened awareness of our dua, inshallah. Is anyone going to join me, or am I on my own? So Hamdan's joining me, innit? Has anyone else got 10 minutes every day for the next 5 days? Okay, I'll send you the link. Inshallah. Okay. Yeah, so just as an overview, it's a 5 day course, and it's 10 minutes every day. And the aim of it is to get you to make your du'as only for those things which you're taking action for. And the du'as which you make on a daily basis will correlate with the du'as which you make for an action, which is interesting. So there's some of the questions on the board, man. Any questions about that so far? I know that was a lot, man. Because it was a recap, I went a bit quicker. But has anyone got any questions so far? Okay. No questions. So everyone's 100% on board. Okay, that's good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, true, man. Mm. 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 Yeah, that was the gratitude event. That was on a Sunday evening. Yeah. Yeah, that was when it's, so again. Essentially, the solution very often for the negativity is to ask empowering questions. And an exercise for asking empowering questions is to do a gratitude exercise. So if when you turn the news on, the news answers the question, "What's going wrong?" For those of you that there's a gratitude course on my channel as well. So what that does is, instead of asking what's going wrong, it asks you what's going right, which is the simple thing. And I think just a couple of days ago we spoke about the hadith sections, where the Prophet ﷺ talks about. There's kind of a whole section there. So one of the things the Prophet ﷺ does is to take good luck from things. It's called tafa'ul. I think it's called tafa'ul, isn't it? That's when Sheikh Abid was here. So tafa'ul, where the Prophet ﷺ says that you should take good things. And then if people would become Muslim and they had names which would be negative, so if somebody became Muslim and their name was like the slave of an idol or something, then because that has the connotation of shirk, the Prophet ﷺ would immediately change their name. So even if somebody's name had kind of a bad connotation, the Prophet ﷺ would change. As we know, most of the Sahaba didn't change their name when they became Muslim. This is another misconception we have. Sometimes, like, if someone becomes Muslim, they have to change their name. But if there was a bad meaning in the name, then the Prophet ﷺ would definitely change the name. Again, just based on the idea that the connotation which the bad name would have. Does that make sense? And that's why even as Muslims, it's important to be careful with what names we choose for ourselves, because of the connotations of that and because of the effect that it has. And it's important to be actively looking for the things which are going right and going well. And in fact, wow, man, we were meant to stop at 6:30, man, and do Quran. Naughty people, man. But what was I saying? The thing is, in reality, if I was to do this lesson, when we actually were on day 7, 8 days ago, the way we did the lesson is we started off with gratitude. We figured out where we are, and then we identified the action point. Yeah. So personally, like, if you want to have dua which is effective, you have to come from a place of having, from a place of kind of identifying what you have at the moment. Does that make sense? If you're going from a place of lack, if you think, I don't have anything, I'm a really bad person, Allah doesn't like me, Allah doesn't help me, Allah's not with me, Allah's not giving me anything, I have nothing good about me at all, and Allah, please give me everything which I don't have. That's not how dua works. Dua is the opposite. Dua is where you realize that you have all these gifts from Allah, and you then ask Allah to help you, like kind of manifest them in the right way. Does that make some kind of sense? So gratitude is a prerequisite for dua being accepted. But because I think most of the people who come to my classes, if you've been coming, I know a lot of you probably came on that Sunday where we had that gratitude course, and even since the first 3 days of Ramadan, I think we dedicated to gratitude, which is the awareness of what Allah has given you. So once you come into that place of knowing what you have, then it just becomes easier to actually figure out your next step to some extent. But I'm glad you guys are asking questions, man. Carry on asking questions. You should. This is not because we've done this quite a few times now. This should be second nature to everyone. Anyway, man. Murad, assalamu alaikum, Murad. You awake? Nice to have you, man. Salih's here as well. Okay, alhamdulillah, man. Are you understanding what's going on, Murad? You sure, yeah? I have to worry, man. Of course I'm worried. What do you mean, don't worry? And man. I think if I'm honest, if I'm honest, I think a lot of people feel that. That's why I say the stuff I say, man. But anyway, man. I wanted to do a bit of Quran, man. I know we done 2 verses yesterday, which were quite good. Should we do the same ones, or should we do something else? I know we've got about 10 minutes. What are you guys thinking? What shall we read today, man? We can read. We could read something different, or we could do Surah Fatiha. Let me give you the options, and then I'll let you guys answer here. So we could do Surah Fatiha. We could do the same 2 verses we did yesterday about Ramadan. We could maybe do like Ayatul Kursi or something. Yeah, man. Or anything else. Yes, people. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other suggestions? Okay, brilliant. Okay, inshallah. Gee, man. Okay, Surah Fatiha. Let me find Surah Fatiha, man. I don't know where that is. Is everyone ready, yeah? Make sure you breathe though, innit? So we'll start with the dua for the Quran. So just notice the breath, because remember, there's 4 I'm just going to go quickly through why the breath is important. So there's 4 places letters come from in Arabic. There's the throat, there's the tongue, there's the lips, and then there's the empty space. Yeah, so the empty space is a, wa, and ya, the mad asli. Then apart from that, the throat letters, some of you will know, like ayn, ha. There's the tongue letters, which is most of them. And there's ba and fa and mim, which come from the lips. So just notice these 4 areas, and just remember to breathe in, and see if you can just notice these 4 areas. It's a bit like head, shoulders, knees and toes, but instead of head, shoulders, knees and toes, it's throat, tongue, lips and empty space. It doesn't even rhyme, but anyway. So it's good to just be aware of these areas before we move on. So just noticing here. So here's empty space. Then is ayn, which is from the throat. Dhal, which is the tongue letter. So a'udhu billahi. من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Does anyone know when was the last time we done Surah Fatiha? I can't find it, man. Anyway, just remember to breathe and just notice where the letters come from this time. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Good. بسم الله الرحمن. الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Good. Again, just noticing where they all come from. I'm going to stop trying to guess and just Google it now. Okay, so we'll move on to Surah Fatiha. Alhamdu lillahi. Alhamdulillahi. Good. Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Good. Is everyone alright with that? Any questions about that? Is that okay? Good. Next one. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Good. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu. Good. So here, just I wanna bring a bit more detail from here onwards, because we've done the first three verses recently. Just from this verse, so from verse 4. So we've got the ya has the shadda. Yeah. So just as a rule, everyone should really know this by now. Whenever a letter has a shadda is this W thing, which the ya has here. So if you can look at the mouse, the ya has this W on it. So whenever a letter has a W, it means you're meant to hold the sound of the letter before you say the actual sound of the letter, if that makes any sense. So this means that there's going to be two sounds as opposed to one. So E, Y, Ya. Does that make sense? So Iyaka. Good. And this with the ka, it's a ka sound and it's going to be flat. Your lips should be wide. Same with the ya, same with the ha. So all three, smile as much as you can. Iyaka. Good. It's actually a really simple word. For English speakers and for Urdu speakers, it's not that difficult, this iyaka. But I just want you to get it perfect so that when we move on, we don't struggle. Yeah. So remember to smile, remember to breathe, and this time, because we've practiced, I just want you. There's no force involved now. You're kind of becoming a vessel for the word, as opposed to forcing the words out. Does that make sense? So just remember to breathe. Iyaka. Good. Na'budu. Good. So this ayn here has a sukoon, so it's read quite quickly. The ayn has kind of a strangling sound in the throat. You have to be breathing from your diaphragm for the throat to be relaxed for this. So na'budu. Okay, now just from the beginning, and remember this is really easy. Yeah? Iyyaka na'budu. Wa iyyaka. The waw is a round sound. Yeah? So the lips will go round for the origin of the waw. The waw has a fatha though. So the waw is round, but the fatha will make it flat. So, I'm sorry, I move my hands. Wa is kind of what you want to happen with your lips. So, wa iyyaka. The iyyaka is all flat, just like the first iyyaka. So, na'budu. Good. So the ayn, because it's got a sukoon, you have to kind of grab the ayn quite quickly. It's a strangling kind of sound. So remember to breathe. Just before we do this once more, just breathe in through your nose and notice the breath come in through your nostrils if you haven't already done that. نعبد وإياك. Good. إياك نعبد وإياك. Good. Then there's the last word, which I think everyone gets stuck on. I mean, it's quite a hard bit because what happens here, we have the sin and the ta. Sin and ta have a very similar point of origin. Yeah, sin, just have a practice. The sin, S sound, teeth come together and the tongue kind of hits the bottom of the top teeth. That kind of sound. Then you've got the ta, and this time just breathe and just practice saying ta, ta, and notice where your tongue goes. Where does the tongue go for ta? Very similar to the sin. Quite close, yeah? Sa, ta. It's a different sound, obviously, but the tongue and the origin is very, very close. So naturally, before we even go into the word, this is going to be hard. Yeah, harder than most. To get nas, ta, because the tongue is going to struggle to get them both out. But don't worry, it's very easy as well at the same time. So the noon is a flat sound, sin is a flat sound, ta is a flat sound, it's all fathah, so it's going to be smiley face, all of it, yeah? So, nasta. Good, now we've got that practice in. Now I just want you to breathe, and just now, instead of forcing it, just trying to notice the letters, bring in that curiosity and remembering to breathe. Nasta. Good. And what basically will happen, probably for all of you, is the ta involves the tongue, so the tongue will become tense. Yeah, you should be able to notice that. So try and notice that, and obviously by noticing and curiosity is what kills the tension. Nesta, and now you can just notice the tongue hitting exactly the right place. Don't worry about where that place is, but okay. And then I've got the in. Good. Nasta'in. Good. Nasta'in. Now I'm just going to do the last half here, so just remember to breathe, take your time. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Good, people. How was that? It's probably one of the harder verses. It's one of the longer verses, and it's got the sin and ta together, which is quite hard to say together. So this is always a good practice, and to be honest, it's good to always practice Surah Fatiha and get into that kind of thing. So now, inshallah, when you pray Maghrib today, or for those of you that still need to pray Asr, you'll notice that when you come to this verse, try and you don't need to force much at all, but it's just noticing that you're a bit more aware that the sin comes from there, the ta comes from there, and instead of trying to guess, now you know where the ta comes from. So you actually know where your tongue's meant to be. So it gives you a lot more control, inshallah, on that reading, man. So even that simple thing, just whenever the scene comes, now you're a bit more aware of that. And smiley, they're all smiley. So إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. It's just the budu where you round the lips a bit. The rest of it is all smiley face, which actually really helps with the clarity of the letters as well, man. Anyway, man, hope that was useful. But inshallah, man, see you guys tomorrow, inshallah, man. 6 o'clock, inshallah. Good to have you on, man. Jazakallahu khair. Okay, inshallah. Okay, barakallah. Okay. Okay, you're welcome, man. Barakallahu fik. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. You're welcome, man. Jazakallahu khair. Barakallah. Inshallah. Inshallah, man. Assalamu alaikum. So good to see you all, man. MashaAllah, everyone turns their cameras on.